I want to welcome everyone to our show again, School Zone. It's a new program here on Sholo TV, and it's where we really are dealing with education issues, things that are important to the administrators, to the teachers, to the parents, and to the students. And right now I have with me two guests that intimately know about the school issues that we're going to talk about today. That would be Superintendent Kevin Brackney from the Sholo District.
Hi,
Kevin.
Gary.
And Superintendent Hollis Merrill from Snowflake. You
Good
can
to
say
be
hello
here.
there.
Yes,
okay.
I did.
And Mike Wright from Blue Ridge was not able to make it today, but we will have him on our next show. And a lot of things have been going on up in the Blue Ridge District, and we'll definitely be talking about that. Well, let's just jump right in because we've only got half an hour here to talk about some pretty important issues. And on our last program, our first program and our last program that we did, right at the very end, we started to talk a little bit about the budget and the fact that the legislature was in the process of putting that together. The governor was making his proposals, and since then, of course, they've passed a budget. And we hear from the governor and the legislators that it's a fantastic budget. They've increased funding for all the schools, and everything is pretty good from what I hear. Now I've got two superintendents sitting here, and I'm going to ask you to tell me, is it pretty good? Is that a good budget?
Oh, what do you think?
You want to go first? Go ahead, Kevin.
Give you a little perspective of what we've dealt with over the past few years, and Hollis, jump in whenever. Sholo Schools has lost, not just because of the override, but because of the lack of funding. Schools have been cut tremendously. We've lost almost $7 million in budget capacity, either through M&O, capital, transportation funding, whatever it is. And that's made it very difficult to continue with the same programs. It makes it very difficult to hire quality teachers, to attract and retain quality teachers, not just to Sholo, but to the White Mountains in general. I mean, we talk about it as superintendents all the time. How can we attract and get good folks in front of our kids? And when you're losing $7 million out of your budget, I don't know very many folks that could continue on and function in that manner. So when the governor talks about the budget and they say they've done a good job, what folks don't realize is they'll put the money in up front in the M&O through some method, formula that they use, but they take it out the back end, and they usually take more out on the back end through district additional assistance, our capital funding, things like that. Sholo used to get about $1.2 million in capital funding, soft capital, unrestricted capital that we could use to purchase buses, paint buildings, do things like that. We got building renewal money. School Facilities Board would help, pay for some of the improvements we needed, things like that. We don't get that anymore. School Facilities Board, the state would fund School Facilities Board up to $252 million a year for the entire state. And that was just one separate thing, building renewal funds and new buildings, things like that. Today they have 16 million. So it's gone from 252 down to 16 million for the entire state. It's kind of hard to make ends meet. And yeah, when folks talk about we've increased the funding for schools, yeah, in one pot they have, but they've taken more out the back end. So you've got to take from that pot to fill in the back end, and it's never the same.
And let me ask a question. I'm going to let you jump in, but you're just making me think of this as you're talking. And you talk about the formulas that are used. Do you, as superintendents, do you get to go and make a case for why you should get more of that money, or is it strictly a formula that's applied across the board to every district regardless of what the need is?
As far as the budgets we get, we receive similar funding each district, and equalization formulas make sure that happens. So it's not a case of where Sholo could go lobby and get more funding than Snowflake. Our budget limits are set based on our enrollment. So there's some federal funding that some schools get in different things, but generally speaking, we get the same funding. Let me make a few comments and then kind of answer the question about do we agree with the governor's assessment this was a great budget. The concern I've had for many years is that in the state of Arizona, we continue to whittle away at school budgets, but at the same time we're increasing budgets for tax credits, for voucher programs. And so now we have in the state of Arizona, you can have a private business run with taxpayer dollars. And so even right now today, there's still legislation they're discussing that would increase those programs, increase the strain on the state budget. And so that's one of the concerns I've had. And in my opinion, if I'm a taxpayer and a citizen, I continue to be baffled by why our citizens allow that to continue to happen. The state prison budget was increased dramatically this year. In the same year, they're talking about budget cuts for education. So those are some concerns that I have about the entire process and the budget and how and where we're headed, because it's more to privatization. Tax dollars going to private businesses, which in my opinion is a lot of people's opinion unconstitutional. I don't have a problem with school choice and those things, but to allow people to run private businesses with tax dollars is again puzzling to me why we allow that to happen in the state of Arizona.
A little frustrating.
Now, governor's budget, initially he was talking, his initial proposal wanted to take money from non-classroom expenditures. And those of us at schools made our opinions known and shared what that would do to our schools. As a result of that, they changed that a little bit. And they cut us in district additional assistance, which is basically capital funding that Mr. Brackney was talking about. I like to compare it to taking a piece off of a rope and adding it to the other end and saying, look, we gave you more money. Your rope's longer now. In the state of Arizona, some schools did come out a little bit ahead. Some came out behind. We got an email that had all the schools in Arizona. In Snowflake, we came out a little bit ahead. But what Mr. Brackney was saying about capital, we also received about $1.2 million. And next year we'll receive $100,000. To put that in perspective, this week we purchased textbooks or workbooks for our K-3 schools for next year. That's an annual cost of close to $40,000. If we do that next year and purchase band uniforms, which is something we're considering right now, that will take the entire $100,000 we have. We'll have zero money left for any other purchase, repairs, vehicles, carpet, plumbing, anything we have. And so that's very troublesome and absolutely impossible to do. So we'll have to make some pretty serious decisions moving forward. We'll try to carry some money over from this year to next, but the following year, if things don't change, our community will have to make some really serious decisions about what they want to continue to provide for our students and eliminate, because it will be impossible with only $100,000 to operate the entire district. Because the majority of our M&O funding, maintenance and operation, goes to salaries. So they didn't cut us from that area. They cut us from the money that we use to maintain our buildings, buy desks, textbooks, classroom supplies, football helmets,
Sure.
football,
why do you think
those
that they
things.
did it that way? Do they think that that's more of a hidden cost that, we don't see that money going away as much as we would if you're cutting in the classroom itself, you're cutting teachers or
for political
personnel that
reasons, in
way?
my opinion, but
So let's talk about some real specifics with the districts, because someone listening to this show, they're tuning in, they've heard the commentators on the television programs and the politicians talking about the budget and singing the praises, and you've just laid out a pretty draconian view of what you're facing as superintendents trying to deal with this. Kevin, take Show Low District, and we've heard a little bit from Hollis on, over in Snowflake, what he's going to be dealing with too. How's it impacting you? Is it the same type of a deal? Have you gone from a decent pot of money to basically no pot of money? That's what it sounds like.
We obviously we've got money. We're operating. We're paying the bills. The difficult thing is when you're trying to improve the educational system, and money is coming out, and I think that's the deception that's happening. You talk about the draconian type picture that we're painting. It's really reality. It's a fact. Sometimes how do you cut the pie, and when you cut it one way, it might look good to somebody, but the other person it's not very good because they're not getting a very big piece of that pie. Not that we haven't given pay raises, maybe minuscule type things like that, but the problem is we've had to increase class sizes, things like that really hurts the educational process. If you're trying to be successful and with respect to kids and academic scores, you don't want to take money out of the classroom, but the reality is I got to pay a bus driver to get the kids to school. We got to pay the electric bills. Those electric bills, where do they come from? Capital dollars, M&O dollars, where it is. And it doesn't matter. We have to have books, we have to have computers, we have to have the lights, we got to have the buildings, we've got to pay to mow the grass. And when people say, we'll just cut 5-10% out of those things and keep the money in the classroom, I don't realize that our custodian's only making $9.50 an hour or $10 an hour. Now we're going to take $1 an hour away from them to put back in the classroom. It's hard to live, and right now our drivers are doing the same thing. Our technology folks are secretaries. Those dollars are as equally important as the dollars in the classroom to manage a building, to keep it up, to get the kids there. Our aides, we're having to cut aides and services to kids, and it's not. It hurts. It does.
I'm a viewer, and I'm hearing you, and I'm going, oh, come on, you guys. Bloated bureaucracy. We all know, you school districts, you've got more people sitting in an office, pushing paper around. Getting rid of those people is nothing. That's not going to have any effect on the education of my kid.
If you're sitting here listening to this, you've probably heard, oh, budgets, budgets, budgets. I have employees that have worked in other industries that are on our campus now, and I've asked them, how efficient are we compared to where you've been before in private businesses and industries? And the response is more efficient than anything I've ever seen. We have teachers helping clean classrooms. We have administrators cleaning bathrooms. We are about as efficient as we can be. The problem with that is I've had legislators say, well, see, you guys can do it, so you don't need more money. And I think that's a shame for our students. Our students deserve better than that. And certainly we have had to cut programs and things that impact our communities when we're eliminating positions like I'm doing right now as a result of budget, lost student enrollment, and the governor's budget on top of that. That impacts our entire area economically. If you look at the combined numbers of the districts in this area and the numbers of employees and the amount of money we put into the economy, it's significant. We are the largest employer in Navajo County when you add public schools, and that's a significant thing to remember. When the governor and the legislators pass a budget, it's easy for them to say, hey, we did a great job, we're moving on. I heard someone from the Navajo County recently say, it's all well and good for them to do that, but then it's the counties, the cities, the school districts that face the reality of what that budget means. I don't think any of my legislators have had to sit next to somebody and say, you don't have a job next year. We're solving the problem at the local levels for the decisions they make down there. So it's not as difficult to sit and maneuver a budget and say, this is what we're going to do, and pat each other on the back and say, we're good for another year, because they're not the ones that have to deal with the reality. They haven't cut their... In fact, I will share this. We were at the legislature several years ago talking about budget cuts, and one of the superintendents raised his hand and said, what have you cut at the state capitol? Have you cut any of your help here? And one of the legislators' response was, all of our people are important. Certainly that didn't get a positive response to the school people who were there. Well, certainly when you're talking about kids, our people are important as well, and I've probably taken too much time on that topic.
You're doing great.
That's okay, and I want to remind the viewers that you're watching School Zone, and this is where we are talking about educational issues, things that are impacting our districts here from the state level and local levels. And if you, by the way, have a suggestion for a topic you'd like us to tackle on future programs, you can go ahead and email me directly to GaryAdams@KVSLRadio.com, and I'll be happy to take that, and we'll throw it out on the table and go at it. Sticking with the budget, because it's such a big issue that we're going to deal with. Hollis, you said earlier, well, you know, the public's going to have to deal with this, the parents, that, you know, in the future they're going to have to make some tough choices. But you're making those tough choices right now. I mean, you guys can't wait on and hope that 6 months down the road or the next budget session they're going to do something, because you've got what you've got. So
I was going to point out that what's happened at the state level is basically pushing the cost of education to the local level. That is occurring and will occur to a greater degree as we move forward.
And so when you talk about the parents having to make choices and the citizens that are in Show Low and Snowflake, are you talking about, you know, that you're going to go to them and say, okay, do you want band versus football or art classes?
Larger class size, you know, that's what we're faced with every day. We're at a point now where we've cut everything we possibly can, all the stuff around it. We haven't given pay raises. We've struggled in that area, but now we're making the decisions. Are we going to offer music, PE, elective courses? What kind of elective courses are we going to offer? We're whittling those down. We're at a point where if this continues to go on, we're going to have to start losing salaries or positions and that sort of thing to be able to meet the needs of the kids as best we can. But we're at that point.
One of the things that you said, I mean, what they've done in the budget, if I'm hearing what you guys are telling me right, is they've essentially kind of left the money alone for the in the classroom costs at the moment, right, that you get from them for teachers and that kind of thing, and they're really cutting the money over on that capital side. But obviously, when you're cutting it over there and you don't have the resources, you're going to eventually have to cut over on the other side too.
Absolutely.
How does it impact teacher retention? How do you attract new teachers from, say, out of state that, you know, they're looking around, they're trying to find a job, they see you've got an opening, and then they see all this stuff that's going on, the budget's getting cut. Does that really have a negative impact for you guys?
Huge.
Absolutely.
If you look at, since I've been at Show Low, first got there, we would replace probably 30% of our staff each year. When the override passed, those numbers went down to 2, 3, 4% of turnover. Staff was excited, happy. We were able to compete with salaries and things like that, and it was a good time. Obviously, the override fell. Then we hit that recession. When you have to close schools, it's never fun. People are hurt. Students are now being bussed around. You have to make those decisions, business decisions, to keep afloat. And the reality is that over time, like I said, Show Low's lost almost $7 million. We just lost rural schools. Rural schools funding for in the White Mountains, Show Low, Snowflake, Blue Ridge, Heber, we're all losing it, and that's dollars on the federal level. Right now, if you look at our overall budget of about $14 million, around, I want to guess, $2 million comes from federal programs like title funding, things like that. About $9 million comes from state aid, thank you, equalization, and about $7 million comes from our own taxpayers here in our district. And I think what's happening is you see the state trying to switch that responsibility of paying for education back to the local level. And the thing is, in the White Mountains, we don't have the infrastructure and the tax base of the property taxes and things like that. If you go to Holbrook, you know, you're talking $36 million assessed value. You go to Show Low, you got a $200 million assessed value. You go to Pine Top Lakeside, it's a little more. You go to Mesa, where you've got Boeing, huge industries, businesses, that tax base is easier, and it's not on the individual. So it's a little easier to swallow to raise the money to have an override than it is in a rural community, and all of us get hit hard with that decision.
So where is the disconnect? Because Hollis, you mentioned, you know, you're talking a little bit about you can't really understand why the citizens keep allowing this to happen. So there's a disconnect somewhere between the districts and the educators and the citizens that are out there. They're not.
It's a complicated issue for people to understand how tax rates impact school funding and how much I get from the state, it's complicated. When our tax rates took a pretty sizable jump, I got people coming to my doorstep saying, "What are you doing to me? Tax rates have gone up." That really had nothing to do with anything I did. All it had to do with was the fact that in Snowflake and Taylor, the assessed values went way down. And so the amount of taxes everybody paid went up to support our budget. And in Snowflake, I call ourselves a poor district in that our assessed values are so low, we only raise about 15% of our budget through local taxes. So we're supported by state funding. We don't have the tax base that Show Low and Blue Ridge did, even though they don't even have enough to raise the full amount. It's minimal amounts. And so it's a complicated issue for people to try to understand that if they see their tax bill and it says the amount I'm paying towards the school went up, they think we're spending more money when in fact we're losing $7 million in Show Low's case, and it's close to that same amount in Snowflake's case. But I don't know. It's an interesting. The media has some influence in that. The legislators that are pushing those programs obviously have some influence over that too. But in our community, we've taken a really low-key approach to our budget cuts. That's good because we've been able to maintain, order, and we've been able to maintain, a high-quality learning environment. The downside of that, our community doesn't really understand how close we are to making some extreme decisions. Show Low's had to do some things with schools that we're also looking at down the road, reconfiguring and some of those types of things that we'll start taking to our community and start talking.
It just seems, I'm trying to think of a parent and I'm listening, and you hear these numbers and you hear $14 million and all that, and you think, how can you possibly have a problem when you got $14 million to spend? Mm-hmm. And I can't fathom that being a problem, that you can't get good teachers and buses maybe have to have deferred maintenance done on them because you just don't have the money. And that's why I was asking about that disconnect, is that it seems like somehow between your issues and the budgets that you're trying to work with and the average citizen out there, we're not looking at it the same way. And I know I can remember when bond issues would come up, and the schools always, you come out and you say, we need this and we got to have that, and if we don't have this, we're going to cut that. And I think maybe people get jaded about that kind of thing too. They think, well, you've cried wolf and now you're crying wolf again, and do we believe it? But this is the real deal.
This is.
We were just, and we were meeting with the city and the county. Our parking lots at Show Low School District are in miserable shape. We don't have the capital to
I
fix
think I
those.
hit a few potholes last time I was there.
Drive a little faster. If you got that insurance on your tires, you might get a new one. But just to maintain and keep your buildings up to speed is impossible right now. We cannot do it. We do need support from the community. I had an opportunity to go to New York for a couple of years and experience that. Right now, New York's paying around $17,500 a kid. We're paying less than $7,000 a kid for education in Arizona. Okay, we're getting a great bang for our buck, but we're actually at the point that we're Show Low, in the next couple of years, if it keeps going like this, we're going to have to make decisions on, are we going to offer PE? Are we going to offer music? Or what level are we going to require this? How are things going to look? And I think if you look at what is happening to education, I think there's some folks that feel privatizing education will give a better quality education. I don't think anything could be farther from the truth. If I look at Snowflake or Blue Ridge and Show Low, we have provided a great education. This country is strong because of the quality of education we've provided. If we were running, I'm just going to use a scenario, I run for office and Hollis is running, and I say, I'm going to cut taxes and I'm going to save money and put more money in your pocket. You love that. Hollis says, well, we need to raise taxes to have a quality education program. We need to put more money in the classrooms. We need to do this. And I'm going to get elected. He's not. And that's right. Where people stop. And they don't realize We do need a police force. We do need a military, and we need a strong education program. And you don't get it paying peanuts. You can't drive a Cadillac and expect to pay the price of a lesser car.
And if we had the dollars going to the education, maybe we wouldn't need to increase the prison budgets.
That's right.
That's
well, that was some nice foresight, right?
Yeah.
If you cut education budgets, you probably will need a higher budget for the prison system. But as far as your budget, though, we post our budgets on the websites. We tell anybody that has any questions, come look at it. Come see what we're doing. We hide nothing. And but the challenge is, school budgets are complicated.
Mm-hmm.
The formulas are complicated, and that's a legislative issue. It'd be nice if somebody would take care of that at some point. But we open our books to anybody that wants to come see them, and we have had people come in. Once they see what we're doing and what we're trying to do, they go away with a whole different level of understanding.
Well, that's a good thing for people to know, and it's actually good that you just said that, because in my ear they're telling me that we're almost done. I think we've only got about a minute. So I'm going to tell you that I had a couple of other issues I was really looking forward to getting into, and maybe the next program we'll talk about that, how the Bill 1172 that would basically stop.
We might not be able to have these conversations.
We won't have this conversation. In the meantime, I do want to say to our viewers that we do appreciate you tuning in. We hope that we're giving you information that will help you have a better sense and understanding of what's going on with the educational system here in our area, and for Show Low, Blue Ridge, and Snowflake. And again, if you have any suggestions for topics, questions you'd like to have me ask, please go ahead and email me at garyadams@kvslradio.com. Kevin and Hollis, I want to thank both of you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, obviously, this is an issue we could spend a lot of time talking about, so I'm sure we'll be revisiting it as we go. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.